At 19, Abbas inherited an empire that was effectively a ghost. To signal his break from the traditional elders of the court, he performed a public act of defiance. He shaved his beard, leaving only the prominent mustache that became the mandatory fashion for his new administration. The geography itself was a trap. To the west, the Ottomans were swallowing provinces, while the Mughals pressed in from the east, leaving the Iranian heartland squeezed between two of the most powerful gunpowder empires on earth. But the most immediate danger sat at the Shah's own dinner table. The state was paralyzed by the Qizilbash, a decentralized network of tribal warlords who held the real military power and treated the Shah as little more than a useful puppet. The empire's founding ideology was also decaying.
For decades, the Shah's authority rested on being a mystical Sufi guide, but that spiritual reverence had evaporated, leaving no shared reason for the different tribes to stay loyal to the throne. Standing in the wreckage of his predecessor's reigns, the young Abbas faced a blunt reality. The current system was designed to keep him weak. If he followed the old rules of tribal compromise, he wouldn't just lose the empire, he would likely lose his life. He concluded that surviving meant doing the unthinkable. He would have to systematically strip the warlords of their birthrights and re-engineer the very foundations of the state to ensure every lever of power sat in his hands alone. His solution started with fire. Abbas bypassed the tribal levies entirely and built a professional, centralized standing army equipped with the latest gunpowder technology. He filled the ranks of this new force with thousands of Caucasian captives. Because these soldiers had no local lands and no tribal kin, they were loyal to a single entity, the royal K-roll. While he secured the streets, Abbas also secured the soul of the state. He began moving away from the loose, decentralized Sufi mysticism that had allowed local leaders to claim their own divine authority. To replace the old traditions, he imported institutional Twelver Shia scholars from Lebanon and Iraq. They were tasked with creating a rigid, state-controlled religious legal structure. This new religious bureaucracy was a political masterpiece. It replaced the Shah's role as a mere spiritual guide with a new status, a divinely sanctioned autocrat whose word was law. By replacing tribal militias with a paid army and shifting from mysticism to institutional law, Abbas ensured that all physical force and divine legitimacy converged at a single point, his throne. Maintaining this massive infrastructure required staggering amounts of cash. But with enemies holding the traditional overland trade routes, the empire was effectively being starved of revenue. Abbas responded by nationalizing his most profitable resource. He seized total control over the production and sale of Persian silk, turning a luxury craft into a strict royal monopoly. Look at the maritime corridor into the Persian Gulf. By building the port of Bandar Abbas, the Shah bypassed Ottoman land routes, depriving rivals of taxes. Partnering with the English East India Company, he broke Portuguese and Dutch navies, gaining direct global market access. He used this sudden flood of wealth to build Isfahan. This wasn't just a capital city, it was a massive architectural stage designed to broadcast Iranian dominance to every visiting foreign diplomat. The propaganda reached even the smallest details. State-sponsored artists like Rizai Abbasi pioneered a new style of single-page miniatures, trading old cliches for sharp, intimate line work that felt modern and sophisticated. The results were global. European courts became obsessed with the Sufi, as the English called him. Diplomats flooded into Isfahan, and Persian fashions became the gold standard for aristocrats from London to Venice. Isfahan and its art were the final pieces of the puzzle. They weren't just beautiful, they were part of a calculated campaign to prove that Iran was no longer a fractured state, but the center of a new world order. By the height of his reign, Abbas had achieved total control. Every military unit, every silk shipment, and every legal decree was personally vetted by him. He had become the indispensable brain of the empire. But absolute power has a psychological cost. As the years passed, the man who outmaneuvered every enemy began to fear his own shadow. Paranoia took hold. To protect his absolute grip on the throne, he began viewing his own family as threats. He ruthlessly executed his eldest son and blinded his remaining heirs. ensuring no one could ever challenge him. When Abbas died in 1629, the machine he built was still standing, but there was no one left who knew how to run it. He had spent his life eliminating any potential rival, leaving the empire in the hands of the very people he had kept weak and isolated. This record of the 1694 collapse shows the inevitable result. Without a strong central architect, the silk monopoly fell apart, and the English companies that Abbas had once used as tools began to dominate the Iranian coastline. The rigid bureaucracies that had once projected power now became heavy and unresponsive. Without Abbas to micromanage the tribal and religious factions, the state slowly fractured under the weight of its own centralization. Abbas saved his empire from immediate ruin, doubling its territory and centering it in the global silk trade. But the same concentrated control that made his reign great ensured that, once he was gone,